go live? Hey everybody, welcome. This is Common Ground. I believe that I am live. So I'm still using my hey guys. Yeah, I'm still using my I'm new with the Zoom thing, so let me know if you guys can hear and see me okay before I get going. Glad you're all here. Lovely to have you. Thank you so much. Hi, Ken and Denise. Hi, Trish. Hi, Carol. Hi, Joe. Yeah, let me, guys, type in, please. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Looks, sounds good. Sean Eiferman. Hello, Sean Eiferman. All right, guys, I'm going to get us started because we've got a big night. I'm super excited about tonight, and I want to get our guest on as quick as possible. So I'm going to kick our show off as I always do by welcoming you to our show, Common Ground. Good evening. Thank you for being here. You are on Common Ground, the place where an open mind is the greatest asset and fear not allowed. When our show began, we wanted to create a platform for civil disagreement. The fear we were fighting then was in the great divide of bipartisanship in America. But now there's a new enemy. The fear we fight on the show these days is in the form of division regarding how to deal with a global pandemic that has impacted the lives of nearly every person living on this planet. With people sick and dying, this fear is far more palpable, far more real. So for the foreseeable future, our show will seek to dispel the fears of our viewers with good information, a sense of community, a sense of humor, and above all, the reminder that none of us is alone in this struggle. For the first time in memory, we are truly and quite literally all in this together. So I'm your host, John Lombardo. This is Common Ground. And as you know, I have a co-host. I'm going to bring him on board. So let's bring in Eric Rodriguez, the smartest guy who still hangs around with me. Look at that handsome guy. There he is, looking all Celtic and whatnot. So, hey Eric, welcome. I can see a picture of you, but I cannot see you yet. There you are, my friend. Good to see you. How you doing?
I have my Zoom always set without video, and then I have to click it on, and so that was what that was. I was also watching your intro, so it would have been of weird feedback had I not been able to close that. So hi everyone.
So Eric is with us, and so is someone else I'm super excited about tonight. So as Americans demand that we reopen our businesses and schools and apparently make that demand of a virus that doesn't speak American or care about your Memorial Day plans, we are faced with this strange, very strange circumstance of what do we do? And so, whoa, we wanted to take advantage of our new format today, bring you something that is in woefully short supply, good information. So from the beginning, I've always wanted this show to do more than the limits of the platform would allow. Tonight, that dream is what Joe Biden's presidential campaign is to Joe Biden, partially realized. So up until now, this show could have just as accurately been called two jackasses blathering on about things they know nothing about. But tonight, we solved that problem. Tonight, we have a guest, and not just any guest. We have a bona fide expert. So Teri Girtsman is an immunotoxicologist and a senior scientist in immunoassay development at Abcam. She agreed to be with us tonight. I'm so excited. She's our first guest ever, and she's obviously got some credibility and some experience with these kinds of things that's going to allow us to get an insight that, you know, Eric and I just couldn't provide without you. So I'm going to bring Teri into this gathering, and really excited to have you with us, Teri. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I don't know if you can hear us yet. out there in the virtual world, everybody. Teri Girtsman, give her a big round of applause.
Monkeys behind me.
Teri, I can't. First of all, I just want to tell you
It's,
we're really excited to have you with us, and thank you so much for being here.
yeah. Hey, thanks, John. It's really a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and I want to introduce you to Eric Rodriguez, who co-hosts the show with me every week. Eric's an amazing person. And Eric, tell Teri a little bit about your background, what you have a degree in, and what you do.
I have a degree in religious studies from the University of California, Berkeley. I also have a master's degree in counseling psychology, and I currently work for a local nonprofit, and we support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I am an expert in nothing.
Yeah, right. And I sing John Bon Jovi covers. So listen, we're really excited to have you here tonight, Teri. And I want to start off by just asking you sort of a basic question. How did you come to be involved in maybe not the line of work that you're in so much as you are researching and studying coronavirus? I watched a webinar that Teri did for something called assay. I'd like you to explain what an assay is, but not yet. And I didn't understand most of it, but I just was wondering how you came to be involved in this field, but more importantly, working so closely and so focused on COVID-19.
That's so great. Thank you. So I guess the first place I would start is just sort of my experiential and educational background. I'm a immunotoxicologist, as you mentioned. I work for a company that's a biotech, so I don't actually do the research, but I actually provide the tools for the researchers who are doing the research. And so to back up a little bit about my history is I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in cell molecular biology and a PhD in immunotoxicology. So what that means is I studied toxicology with a mentor who was an immunologist, and so my bend on understanding the nature of how toxins work in the body comes from an immunological background. So it's kind of a lot of words. This is usually the time where people's eyes start rolling back in their head and go get a drink, someplace at a party. So how I actually got interested in this was actually based on desire to continue working in my position. So back in early March, so I'm actually housed here in Eugene, Oregon. The company I work for Abcam is a British company, and they're out of Cambridge, UK, and we have sites a few places over the United States. The place that I work in particular, we provide what John mentioned was called an immunoassay. And so what that means is we put together antibody-based materials that will help researchers to understand protein interactions. And in this case, the protein of interest would be the spike protein that's part of, or the COVID virus itself, but in particular, how that virus actually enters the host cell. So my task was, when we realized it was becoming a problem locally, that we would be going home to work from home. So our wonderful IT folks got us all set up with laptop, everything, which we already had, but just said, you guys go home and work from home, and we're going to lock down and figure out how to have you continue to work while we put you in a safe environment. And so I'm in a product development role, and we also actually make the materials at our site in Eugene. So the production folks, who are probably some are actually probably watching the show, were really amazing about continuing to go in on a skeleton crew, but giving them the entire space so that they could work by themselves. My task was then to help the marketing team and get some information out on COVID. So being that what I studied actually for my postdoc and for graduate school, I studied lung toxicology. So understanding how the lungs respond when they are exposed to toxicants. In my postdoc, actually, I studied nanomaterials. So what would happen if you inhaled carbon nanotubes, which hopefully nobody ever has the opportunity to do.
What would happen if you inhaled those? What would happen?
Oh my gosh, if you think COVID's scary, I can, if you don't think COVID's scary, I can really scare you with nanomaterials. That might be a totally different show. But, yeah, it wouldn't be good. It actually makes your lungs behave in a way that I've never seen before. And, actually to give you a little clue, as I was doing a training with the National Science Foundation, where they decided that scientists weren't very good at speaking to the public. And I gotta imagine, actually, most of the time, that's probably pretty true. So they gave us a training and they said, okay, bring your actual work to us and do a little 3-minute presentation, and we'll teach you how to talk and do sound bites. And after the 3 minutes of me sharing about the nanomaterial exposure, the lead trainer told me I could not do that because it would scare the public too bad. So
well, let me, Terry. I have a question for you. I want to ask you how does and and I don't want to take a bunch of time soundbite format, but what does COVID do to the lungs? How does it work? How does it behave in the lungs? What does it cause to happen?
So what happened? Well, what we know, right? So I always like to preface by saying scientists study these diseases for many, many years trying to understand. So what we are dealing with is 5 months, 6 months now from the first known exposure. And the brilliant scientists, mostly in Asia, who studied SARS to begin with, because SARS CoV-2 is what we're dealing with now. That's the actual real disease, I guess, name. The disease output they call COVID-19, but SARS-CoV-2 is actually the viral nomenclature. So how we know what we know about it is based on what the scientists for the last 20, almost 20 years had been studying about SARS itself. And the good fortune that we have, I guess if you want to call it, is that the SARS-CoV-2 actually enters the lung the same way that SARS does. And what it does is it attaches to, it hijacks a receptor called angiotensin 2 converting enzyme. I'm going to quiz you on this, John.
Oh no!
Afterwards.
Okay. I don't even remember my middle name right now, so I don't think that. I guess, but so I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going. I have another question for you as soon as you're done with this one. But
well, I'm just going to make this really quick. So what it does is it accesses the same receptor that SARS did. So that gave us a big leap in understanding how to deal with this protein, and how to actually target the actual research. And it uses another protein called TMPRSS2 to actually cleave it, so that it actually what that means is it models the virus so it actually can enter and being taken up into the human cells. And it's really particular about the cells that it enters. In the lungs, it's an alveolar type 2 cell, so it's actually the deep part of your lungs. So those droplets actually have to get into the lungs. So that's one of the things I was really concerned about. Everybody's worried about the mailman, and if I touch it, I'm going to get it. And what I believe to understand from the literature is that you actually have to inhale it. You have to
through the mouth is the only way. Into the lungs is the way you're going to get
right.
This. So there's a question, and I want to just say this really quick. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you have questions, put them in the thread. I'll be happy to ask them for you. And so Terry, one of our questions from Joey wanted you to explain, how is this different from the flu? So the actual question was, how is it different from the flu?
That's a super good question, and I'll tell you, it's a different virus. It it is a tricky virus. This virus in particular has figured out how to not just get into you, is it figured out how to turn down your innate immune system so that would originally just, after exposure to the flu, your innate immune system would be able to attack that virus. You would get sick. You probably feel kind of crappy for a week or so, but your immune system does what it normally would do. In this case, SARS-CoV-2 knows how to hijack your T cells so that it actually turns the immune system on itself. It turns off the interferons, which are the type of chemicals that your immune system creates. That what their chief job is to get rid of viruses. It turns those things way down, and then it turns on what's called a cytokine storm. So cytokines are the chemicals in your body that make you feel crappy. They cause you to have fever. They cause you to turn red. They cause you to have pain. They're there to make you know that you're not well. And what this does is it actually turns those up so high and without being able to regulate, it also turns down those regulatory factors so that you get so sick, but you're sick with your own chemistry.
Is there something people can do to build up their immunity? Is something specific that is scientifically validated? And Eric and I don't own any stock in any pharmaceutical companies, so we're not trying to get you to. Is there anything like that would boost immunity?
That is not known. That's a super good question, but it is not known. The one thing that I would really, if I could get anything across to people that are listening tonight that are really interested, don't go and try to get it. It is a really bad idea to go and get it. A lot of people think,
I got to tell you something, Teri. I started the show off last week saying that part of me said, you know what, I wish I could go out and get this thing and get it over with. And Eric said, no, I'm going to wait a year till they have some things that might mitigate some of the symptoms. But that's funny that you said that. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, it's a common misconception, and normally, if you did get the flu, not actually everybody can confer an immunity to everything. I actually end up being a person who doesn't generate antibodies against things a lot of times. So there are people like me who won't generate antibodies against it, who it could cause it could be a real problem. It will be a real problem. The thing about this particular virus is it is entering it's being able to get into any of the cells that express that angiotensin to converting enzyme, and that is your heart, that is your lungs, and for men in particular, it actually is prostate. So there's going to be there actually is a really growing interest in studying male survivors of this, because that prostate expresses that particular receptor in higher abundance. So
I have a question from one of our viewers. This is from Ron in Australia. He said, "Are healthy and fit people at the same risk as healthy and unfit people? Is it the same?"
I don't want to mislead anybody that I am a clinician. I am not. I am a scientist, and all I'm doing is sharing the information that I have read from the clinical studies and from the actual research. So I don't want to give anybody any idea that I'm going to give medical advice. I will not. But what I will say is, what I understand is that the people that are dying from it are quite often, they have comorbidity. What that means is there's a likelihood that they had diabetes, or they were obese, or they had heart diseases that increase their propensity for being sick anyway. But there are plenty of people that were young and healthy that got it, that have problems. One of the things that was really terrifying to me that I saw like 3 weeks ago, I believe, that it's been noted that there's people that are young, that a lot of younger people, 30s, 40s, that are passing away from stroke. So it's showing up in the brain as well. It may not be the brain itself, it may be the vasculature leading to the brain, but there is things that are just really this is uncharted land.
We don't want to get this disease.
We do not want this disease.
There's so one of our viewers, Joe, had said he's heard so much about along the point of what we were talking about and I've seen a lot of this on Facebook. People saying you people are crazy staying home and putting on a mask. Your immune system needs to be strengthened and face these kinds of things. That's sound thinking in normal circumstances, but in this situation, we shouldn't have that type of cavalier attitude. Is that a correct thing to say?
That's how I feel. Actually, my graduate work did surround what's called the hygiene hypothesis,
Mm-hmm.
and I was studying asthma, and that hypothesis where you're saying, like we didn't do kids any favor by wiping them down all the time. It would be better to let them play around in the dirt because that actually helps children to grow a really healthy repertoire of immune response. And if you didn't have that, kids are more likely to have asthma. There's a lot of research that supports that. This is not that case. This is a no. I would not recommend trying to get it. There's a huge interest from a lot of the cancer researchers, the Dana-Farber, the Cedars. A lot of places that study cancer are very closely tracking the survivors because viruses and cancer are also a really cozy little duo. So we have no idea the long-term consequences of this virus.
So I want to reiterate to our viewers, guys, thank you so much for being on. You guys are doing a great job with the questions. Just want to reiterate, Teri is not a clinician. She's not giving medical advice on how to treat COVID-19 or what those kinds of things. We're talking about this from the standpoint of someone who has done this type of research around these types of viruses. But this is new territory, she said. So in that interest, we have a couple of questions I want to answer. Carol asked what you think about the therapies. What is, in your opinion, what do you think about plasma from sufferers being used to build up resistance in people? Is that a sound theory?
Actually, yeah, and I believe there are some of there's a journal called The Lancet, which is one of the primary, very incredibly respected medical journals. So case studies will be published in there. And The Lancet actually did talk about giving what's called anti-sera. And what that means is we're talking about people who have been exposed to it, and they've now generated an immune response. So immune response means that their body is making antibodies against the COVID. And so those antibodies will detect, and basically they can, we just call it kind of mopping up the viruses or the viral antigens, so that it will actually, it would block your body from taking those viruses into your cells, deep in your lungs. And I believe there's actually been some work that's been done with it already, and it looks pretty promising.
Great. So another question here for you. This is from Denise. She wants to say, do you have any advice about the benefits of wearing a cloth mask? So maybe we could frame the question. Are there, in your experience, I mean, we're talking about all diseases, not just this disease. Are there differences in the quality of masks and how how effective they are?
I'd say anything that you put over your face when you're walking around public is going to help diminish your odds of getting it. As I mentioned, you have to actually breathe in a droplet from somebody else that could have coughed. Somebody could have walked across a path that you had just walked across and turned a corner that you didn't see and coughed. It's known that if you, it's pretty well documented that a human sneeze can go like 20 feet away.
Right.
So if somebody sneezes and you walked into it, you could still get it. I don't want to be terrorizing people, but I also kind of do, because if it scares you enough to do preventative action, it may save your life.
And Pete is asking, is there, I think you're probably gonna have the same answer, but Pete was asking, is there a propensity for serious complications for older people with compromised immune systems? And I think that they're probably at the highest risk. Am I?
Yes. Yeah, that's the first case. That's the first high risk group that we've talked about. There's a genetic, there's probably a genetic component to that too. But yeah, older people that already have other underlying health issues. I mean, it just kind of, begets human common sense that if you're not super, super healthy, then you're probably going to get hit with it harder than you would have if you were super healthy.
And so, Teri, from once again, I'm not asking you to give me any definitive answers on this because nobody knows. But in your opinion, I'm not going to get this from going to the store and touching something, and then that's not going to happen.
Well, I'd say use ultra caution. Anyways, I mean, I think I don't want to tell anybody to relax yet. I
Sure.
don't feel okay about that. Because what I'm watching here, which is really troubling to me, is the town I'm in, has just gotten approved to do the phase one, and what that means here in this college town that I live in is like, oh, it's party time, and it's not. It's like you can maybe feel okay if you go to the grocery store and not have to be around a whole lot of other people. It's just we cannot take this seriously enough. Um,
My Joe is asking. He said some people are touting the benefits of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. How effective are these treatments? Well, I want to share something. I'm not going to answer the question when we have someone here who's far more qualified to do that. But in my notes, and if you guys see me looking and it looks like I'm looking at my phone, my notes are on my phone today, so that's why I'm looking down. There is an article. You mentioned the Lancet, Teri. There's an article in the Lancet today that they tested the effects of hydroxychloroquine in combination with the second generation macrolide, whatever that is, on 96,000. There were 96,000 patients. They are unable to confirm any benefit of hydroxychloroquine when used alone or with the macrolide, and these drugs were also associated, according to this article, with a decreased decreased hospital survival and increased frequently of ventricular arrhythmias. So essentially, it was saying this isn't really safe. That actually more people died when they were taking this drug. That's an article, and there was an article, and it linked to the study in the Lancet, and I actually got the study and read it, and as best I could. So
yeah, yeah, I saw that. I saw that article too. And the thing is, chloroquine is used for malaria, and it was, for some reason, it became this. There was excitement around it based on non-scientific data. So yeah, I was really concerned about that.
well, you said non-scientific data, Teri, but I saw people who called themselves doctors on shows talking about that there was some data that reasons to be excited about it, and what was that all about?
I think what they were trying to do is, in the beginning, we were looking for anything to say that maybe we have some ideas of how to knock some of these things down. But there's in theory, when you start thinking, well, maybe this disease looks something like this, which I don't really see SARS-CoV-2 looking like malaria. That's not, that's a different type of pathogen altogether. So, thinking theoretically, but now we actually have real data, and I trust that data because it's actually controlled, and they, they've seen it on real patients that they've tested it on, and it's contrary to what the information was. So, yeah.
Okay, so I read an article about schools in South Korea opening up and then closing again in just a few days.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm really concerned about, and I'm going to talk about this in my closing comments this evening, I'm kind of conservative. I just want to get your opinion on this, guys. This is welcome to Common Ground. Our guest tonight is Teri Girtsman. She's an immunotoxicologist, and she's agreed to be with us tonight to share what knowledge she has. She studies these kinds of diseases, so we're really excited to have her. If you have questions for Teri, please feel free to type them in. My concern, Teri, is that we get one shot at this. When we open this thing up again and people run back out there and we see all these crazy spikes, people are going to go into hibernation after that, and then we're going to have a real problem reigniting this economy. What do you think about that? Do you think that's? I mean, I also I don't want to be an alarmist. I understand why people want their lives to go back to normal. I understand how people. I can understand looking around and saying this doesn't seem that bad where I live. Why can't I go to my job and do that? I understand all those things. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is I actually don't study the disease. I provide materials for people who do study the disease. So when I say I studied it, I'm talking about literature studies. I'm not talking about actually doing the work. So
You're
I
not
just
looking
want to
at it
make
through a
sure.
microscope and
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I don't do that. I do. I am actually involved in making materials for with antibodies that will study like the spike proteins and the temprases and the ACE and those things. So I feel close to it, but I don't want to take any credit away from the real heroes who are actually dealing with this virus firsthand and really high biosafety level facilities. That's not me. So just saying that I'm kind of a armchair warrior on this. I just happen to be able to speak the language, so that's kind of why I'm here. Is that I understand how to read it and I understand how to disseminate it, and that's where I want to be available. So, but as far as what you're saying is, I'll tell you what, I'm hiding. In fact, I'm hiding more than I was. I've been hiding the whole time. I have an office in my basement, and I pretty much have to get pried out of down there because it's so scary. It's just, I would say, don't buy into this excitement that we're going to get to go out and play right now, because I think that's just it's a disaster waiting to happen.
What are the
But
markers that tell us we can go out and play again? What should we be looking for?
we should be looking at the if you look at the Johns Hopkins coronavirus tracker, to me that is like the most legitimate place to look. I hear people commenting about things, but when I look, I want to see that curve come down, and it is still going up.
Yeah.
The curve is really bizarre. I would tell everybody, Google Johns Hopkins coronavirus tracker, and you'll be able to look at it. When you click on the website, on the bottom right, there's a graph, and you can look at it. And the first selection will be the cumulative one. So of course it's going to go up because it's just adding. Do you want to look at the logarithmic? And the logarithmic it should be giving what's called a Gaussian distribution. And you would actually see when it would, if you saw all the data together, once the whole thing is over and we're collecting it, you should see a curve, looks like a bell shape. What we're seeing now is we see it go up, we saw it start to level off, and then it started going up again. And what
Mhm.
my fear is now we're opening things back up where it may have just started to turn a corner, where it may have started coming down, it's going to start going up again. So until we can see it come around that curve, come down, and have a projection to where it will end, I say I don't believe anybody else. That is the data. Those are the cases. The fear I have is like we're in Eugene, Oregon, and Oregon has not had. We are not a state that has a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot of resource. So I'm pretty sure that we haven't tested everybody that was positive. I happen to know the first person in Eugene, in Lane County, that the town that the county that we live in, that had passed away. There's only been 2 deaths, and that my next door neighbor was the RN at the emergency room that took care of that person after they passed or while they were passing. And so that it came really close to us really quickly in March. So it really, having a real tangible explanation of this disease is real, and it killed somebody that was 60 years old, and her husband was a bus driver for the schools who also got it. So you can see that my mindset was, oh my dear God, what's going to happen with the 8-year-olds who were on the bus with this guy?
Oh
You
boy.
know,
Um,
Well, hey, John, I gotta
hop in, Eric. Hop in. Go ahead.
um, so to Terry's point, I saw 2 days ago that worldwide there were more new cases than any day so far. So um, that tells me there's more infected people than there ever was. And in our county, we just have relaxed certain parts of our stay-at-home order, and already I live near a very busy downtown area of where we live. And Teri, you know, it's Ventura. There's already tons of people out there, you know, right now. And this was just relaxed, and it was relaxed after not meeting the criteria that we set. You know, there were certain criteria that were supposed to be met, and then we would relax. Well, I guess because of political pressure, those were not met, and so we're relaxing anyway. And you know, I'm really interested to hear, you know, as far as testing goes, just, you know, an opinion. We understand in our county that we've had about 3% of our population have been tested. And I don't really know what the numbers are, you know, nationwide, but that seems like a small percentage. And it seems to me like we don't really know. We look at the numbers of infections. Well, we don't really know. 3% doesn't seem like it's enough to tell us. And I don't really know what the numbers are, you know, nationwide, but that seems like a small percentage. And it seems to me like we don't really know. We look at the numbers of infections. Well, we don't really know. 3% doesn't seem like it's enough to tell us. John, that was all feedback here. So I mean, I hated statistics, and I've been in social work. But 3% feels to me like it's not enough for us to even like sort of extrapolate out what to expect. And I know two people that doctors told them that the doctor believed that they had coronavirus, and their test came back negative. And I read that as much as 20% of the tests have been, they think, as much as 20% are giving incorrect negative results. Yeah. Have you read about this, and why are we getting so many negative, false negatives, I guess? I mean, I'm not sure if that's even the right way to say that.
Yeah, that's a super good question, Eric. And I'm glad you brought that up, because so there's the original test that we're talking about from the CDC. What that is, it's called a PCR test. And what that does is they will collect your sample and then purify it down to the nucleic acids, the RNA and the DNA. And then what they do is they check, they run it through an instrument and get an output that will be able to sequence the DNA, and they'll look for the DNA of coronavirus to be able to match in your cells, in your samples. We can see that there is a plus 70% match of that sequence. So there's a lot of places that testing can go wrong. One, sample collection is critical. If they don't get the right sample, the right amount of sample, or the sample clean, they might not be able to detect it. If they mess up somehow, I don't want to say mess up, but if the sample handling is not optimal, you can lose integrity of the assay at that point. And if you don't have the right primers, meaning if the test itself isn't accurate, that may also give you, like you said, a false negative. And as we heard, there was some confusion at the CDC where a lot of those assays, the tests were not they were not accurate. They didn't send the material was contaminated. Actually, I had a little bit of an argument with somebody, that a friend of mine, about that at first, and I actually had to eat some crow because I just thought it was like this propaganda. And he was like, "Oh yeah, the CDC's for the birds," and I was like, "Hey, hold on a second, I could just send me the data. I want to. I as a scientist, that's kind of our little comeback, is I want to see the data." So he graciously, actually very graciously, sent me a link to it, and I read it, and I was horrified. I had no idea, and that was terrifying, because what it is the CDC's oversight. The high up scientific leadership has been eliminated. So there's really nobody there's very few knowledgeable people overseeing the people that are providing the materials. So
How
there's
did
a
that
lot
come
of
to pass?
gap.
How is that possible? How did that come to pass? How did it end up that way?
I don't really want to get super political. I really don't. I want to kind of stay away from that. But I would just say, suffice to say, that the administration did not see the value in keeping our CDC intact. And this
Fair
is
enough.
all out from that.
Fair enough. I didn't want to take us into those waters. I really didn't know the answer to the question. It seems baffling to me that we'd be in that circumstance.
One
I
of
have
the
another question, and once again, I don't want to take us into the deep waters of politics, but what do people in the research world think about the World Health Organization? There's so much contention right now between our country and the World Health Organization, and I hear the conspiracy theory stuff. What are you guys? What are your opinion of the World Health Organization? Is it something we should be working in concert with, or is it something we should remove ourselves from and do our own thing?
I know the World Health Organization has had contention for a long time. I guess I always come from the standpoint of take what you like and leave the rest, and as a scientist, scientists are sort of built in our training is to be critical. We look for the holes in the argument. That's what we do, and then we try to figure out how to build a better argument. And so, of course, there's weaknesses in everything, but to be able to turn our back on international collaboration seems asinine to me. And say, well, we're not going to have any part of this doesn't make any sense. Um, you
A
know,
comment from a viewer that I'd like to share with you and just have you give me a 20-second response to. This is from Russell. He said, "My opinion, I am not scared. I will not let them tell me what to do. My wife is an RN. She can't even work right now. How much sense does that make?"
yeah, God, I'm sorry, Russell. I understand, and I can't even put myself in a position to fully comprehend what it would be like to not work, because working is actually saving my sanity, and I'm just fortunate that I'm in the field that has been able to continue to work. So I can see how it could become really difficult to say, if I can't work, I can't support myself, I can't survive, and I'm not seeing people around me, sick. So feeling that, you have to formulate your own ideas in your own safety net. So, but what I will tell you is that if you get exposed to this disease, there is a real likelihood that there is going to be a long-term consequence for it. So if you need to go in public and you need to do things, I would just say I would recommend absolutely doing everything you can to protect yourself. That's really all I can really tell you. I don't want to get in any kind of
Sure.
philosophical debate, but I just want people to protect themselves, and I don't want people to get hurt.
Thanks, Terry. It's very well said. We have another viewer, Pete, asked, is there any evidence that suggests that when the weather's warm or that heat is in any way, a deterrent to this virus?
I've heard that argument, or that philosophy. And as we all know, I mean, the flu season kind of it starts rolling around, later in the year, fall, and kind of hits us harder in the winter, and then it kind of starts to uh, disseminate more, or kind of help alleviate more, in the March and throughout the spring, and getting warmer. We don't know how this is going to work. I don't know that. I've heard UV, I've heard of these different things, but I haven't seen it yet. So what I want to be able to tell you is that, after July and August, yeah, it just went away. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's really practical thinking. But if we see that, then we can say, yeah, there's a likelihood that, increase in temperature, sunlight, whatnot, helps. But that could also be that actually vitamin D that you get from the sun is really instrumental in boosting your immune system. So that may help your immune system, but it may not also get rid of the virus. But as I mentioned earlier, this virus is particularly tricky in knowing how to hijack your immune system against you. So my bets are off on this. I really wouldn't want to comment to give anybody any extra hope. I'm kind of like, I love the summertime. We go out every week in hiking camp and everything. And I'm just like, I have to figure out something else to do with myself this year, because I would love it if I could say, wow, actually something did change. We got a vaccine. I don't see that happening overnight. It's definitely not happening overnight.
One of our viewers, Natalie, said Australia had a huge outbreak amongst other southern hemispheres. Country, not everyone lives in the northern hemisphere. FYI, right? Good. Thank you, Natalie. That's a good point. So we have, by the way, everybody, we have some new viewers. Welcome. This is Common Ground. Tonight we have the pleasure of talking with immunotoxicologist Teri Girtsman. She's our guest. If you have questions for Teri, I want to make it clear that she's not a clinician. She doesn't diagnose and treat COVID-19. She's a scientist, but she does develop tools for people to study this disease, and she does have some expertise in that department. So if you got questions, feel free to ask them. Both Alicia and Joe are asking if there's a round 2 coming, second round coming in the fall. Is that something that we should anticipate? I mean, obviously, I think it's kind of a silly question to say, should we anticipate it? Why would you say no to that? But what's the likelihood maybe of that happening?
I don't know if it'll be round 2 or if it'll just be leftover round 1. I want to see us get rid of what we have first before we cannot predict. This is nothing that anybody that I know of has ever seen before. So my answer is still going to be the same thing: is just protect yourself and try to find ways to entertain yourself that are not around many people. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about a vaccine?
Yeah, I'm excited about a vaccine. I'll tell you that my company, the company that I work for, is British, and we are in Cambridge, England, and we've had twice since lockdown had meetings with our leadership, and they've been talking about how the global community, the global biotech community and research community are coming together and trying to use each other's resources. I mean, I believe that they said that they were setting up tents in the parking lot in our Cambridge, England, so that other researchers there in Cambridge could be using our facilities, our equipment, our instrumentation. I believe I have absolute confidence in the brilliant biotech. Of course, I have to say that, but in the molecular biologists and the chemists, there is a lot of tremendous amount of innovation, and I believe that will happen. One of the hiccups that we have currently in vaccines are the vaccines are. It's very dangerous to try to develop a vaccine with a live virus. So what we do to develop a vaccine typically is use sequences or parts of the vaccine, heat-killed vaccines, to generate the antivirus biology that is used to turn into a vaccine. It's been quite a while since using these live viruses has been recommended, because, like I mentioned, I wouldn't want to be in the lab working with COVID-2 virus that's live.
Right.
So how they're going to get around that, I don't know. But we have brilliant minds. We have absolute brilliant minds, and there's new innovation every day. Our company is working on things that, I'm hoping to help collaborate on, with just parts of the viral entry mechanism, to be able to say, okay, well, how about we just figure out a way to make it so that the virus actually can't enter the cell. Even if you get it, it won't be able to get in, and then your immune system will alleviate it. I know that we'll get around it. It's just a matter of keeping people occupied and safe in the meantime, so that we can provide that.
Right.
Terry, is there something I heard you talking about hijacking the T cell, and that reminds me of HIV. Is there anything that's been learned about blocking the entry to from HIV? Is there anything learned there that helps in this research?
I'm sure there's a lot. There's probably a lot of information that crosses when you're talking about different viruses, and in some senses, I'm definitely not an HIV expert, but being that that's an RNA retrovirus, it's really HIV's like jam is to like uh, continue to evolve itself, tricking the immune system into believing it's one way, but it's actually a different way. I don't want to go too far and get too sciencey and like lose people, but I also don't want to like dumb it down so bad that it's
We've actually had a couple of people thank you for not dumbing it down, so you're doing great.
okay.
They like it.
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's a lot of information that can be gathered just in understanding virology. I think though, as I mentioned, I'm super grateful to that mostly Asian scientists who continued to study SARS, MERS, if you guys remember MERS, which was the Middle East virus, which was super, super lethal. This one is actually not as lethal as the other two. It's just way more contagious. So the percentage of people that those two killed was higher than this, but this one is just infecting everybody.
Yeah.
And we also, like I mentioned, we don't know what the long-term consequences of being exposed to it is.
Well, I keep reading things like that very question, that certain things are seen, certain organ damage. There's these cases with these children who have this syndrome that's related, and we just simply haven't had enough time. Scientists haven't had enough time to really see what the effects are. But it seems clear that if you get this, there's going to be some damage, even people that didn't have any real symptoms or very mild symptoms. The illness was really mild for them. They're having some health consequences, and they don't know if people will recover from those, or in a little bit of time, or if they're permanent.
Yeah, I read a report yesterday from a doctor who's a pulmonologist who's studying. He's looking at the X-rays of the survivors of people who have recovered, so to speak. And then there was an interview with one of them who says he's still not 100%. So, I don't know what recovered means yet. So I would like to know what the criteria of recovered is. But the thing that was startling to me was that they looked at the X-rays of the lungs and they see what's called they appear to have fibrosis. They look fibrotic. And fibrosis is the beginning of COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which could also be the beginning of lung cancer. So seeing things like that from somebody who's sick with something for a month we're talking nanomaterial scary again. And those are things that are really, but those are lung fibrosis was some of the outputs of, breathing in the carbon. So it turns me on my ear. I hear these things and I think, again, do not get it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Common Ground. Thanks for being with us tonight. Our guest is Teri Girtsman. She's an immunotoxicologist, and we're taking questions. If you guys, a couple of times, for those of you out there, I'm going to do a little self-promotion here. Teri, I have posted our link to our Facebook page, Common Ground. If you haven't done so, please take a moment and click on that page and like and follow us. We have a question from Pete. Teri, he was asking if you've seen any of the analytics or any research data on the statistical analysis between the lethality of this disease versus suicides, depression, things like that, from people, the essentially comparing the lethality of the disease with the negative impact of lockdowns and isolation and things like that.
I have not seen anything like that. I've heard some, like news reports, but I have not seen any kind of data. I'm sure that there's people studying every aspect of this, but yeah, I haven't.
And Marcia asks, how accurate is the antibody testing? Many people here in Maui, she's in Maui, think they had this months ago, but then the antibody testing is saying that they didn't. Is that a false hope? People thinking they might have had it and might be immune now?
You know, the antibody testing, so now that is my wheelhouse, because that is the kind of, I work with antibodies. So I do, it it depends on the accuracy of the antibody test. I don't know. I know that there's several different suppliers of the antibody test. Again, if it's not handled correctly, you could get a false negative. But I believe that actually, by and large, most of the antibody tests are going to be quite accurate. The thing that to keep in mind is when you get an antibody test, there's IgG, which means that you've had it, you've been exposed to it, and you generated an immune response in the past, but you're not having an active disease. And then there's IgM, which is the actual active first stage antibody immune response that your body would make. So you could potentially be somebody like me who doesn't hold an antibody response, and that after the IgM, if you don't catch it close enough, you might not see IgG in you. So there is that. But I think highly of the antibody tests. I know that when done correctly, and then that they should be pretty good indicators.
Here's a question from Liz. She said, "I'm." She said, "I saw that report. Also, I don't know which report she's referring to." She said, "Interesting to me because pulmonary fibrosis runs in my family." Oh, she's talking about the lung, the lung damage. I think my brother had double lung transplant due to PF. Are people that have had these types of surgery, like transplants? I mean, I don't suppose they would have any added vulnerability to this virus. Is that so?
Oh, I absolutely do.
They do?
Yeah, absolutely. Because especially if you've had a recent transplant, then you're probably still taking anti-transplant immune suppression drugs. So then you're actually knocking down your immune system on top of it, because your immune system will recognize those transplants as other and reject. So you absolutely would be a higher risk. In fact, unfortunately, I do know of somebody who passed. I don't know this person personally, but that had just recently, a few months back, had a double transplant and got COVID and didn't make it.
Man, you're driving me crazy right now because I just saw a video that someone posted on Twitter of a person who went into a store, didn't wear a mask, and was getting a little bit of flack, and deliberately like coughed and stormed out of the store. Now, I doubt she's sick, and it was to make a point, but this type of behavior. There's a journalist who wrote something interesting. She said, a warped freedom obsession is killing us. And does it seem to you does that make sense to you?
Freedom obsession?
Do that people who are doing something that is potentially deadly behavior-wise because they're trying to fight against this idea that this is an attempt to take away our personal freedoms, which we hold dear?
You know, John, I think, in my ponderances about this, I think that the human being has this wonderful ability to be in denial about things. And however it manifests, it can be, we will lock on to something that will support our argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we need to lock onto some sort of political pose to be able to support that argument, that I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to believe this, and so I have other people that are supporting and giving me the information I need to back the argument that frees me up to go do what I think I want. There was a cab driver in Florida. I saw this like a couple of weeks ago, that got COVID. And he was one of those guys that was driving around with no mask on and saying, and whenever, what was it, spring break, that they just kind of went ape shit down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And no, he got COVID and he's sick, and they're interviewing him in the hospital. And he goes, "Man, I wish I hadn't said that. I don't want anybody else to have to go through what I went through." But I thought, how many people are going to go through what you went through because you were driving them around in the cab? So people change their tune after they get sick with it.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And then Allison had asked what you think from a research standpoint about the idea of people walking around asymptomatic carriers. I mean, that's prevalent also, and we haven't found anything that refutes that. Is that true?
That is from what I've seen in the literature, absolutely true. There's the 3 stages. There's the first stage, which is that you're not actually even, maybe not even showing a viral load, or you are showing a viral load and you're not having any symptoms. The second stage, you may never actually evolve into having symptoms. But the second stage would move on to a higher viral load and you're starting to get sick. And then this third stage would be that you have a severe response and, potentially could be mortal. But yeah, that is the biggest fear, is that anybody who's walking around could have been 3 days ago, gotten infected. They might have enough virus in them now to cough and give it to you, but they don't even think they're sick. No temperature. My sister-in-law works at a hospital kind of close to you guys, and I believe there was one of the employees that came in and they were doing the temp testing. They temp us when we walk in the lab. We have to get a temperature. We have to go through a little, and they caught this individual with a high temp, and they tested him, and they were positive, and they sent him home, and then they had to wait for them to have 2 negative tests before they let them come back to work. But that saved how many people
Right.
from doing that, because the person was asymptomatic and they had a temperature over 100 degrees. They didn't even know it.
Right. Right. So that's it. It just has always made sense to me in this case. And I am like, I've done those personality things, and you could look at how I've conducted my affairs throughout my life. I'm a risk taker by nature, but I don't think this is a risk we should be taking. I concur with you on that. And Teri, we've had you here for an hour. That's usually how long we do the show. I want to wrap it up and say thank you to you. But before we go, I want to give you some last comments. We've got an audience here. If there's anything you want to say to anybody in closing, please go ahead and say it.
I have to tell you, my folks and my brother, all you guys, live down in Ventura, and it's been so hard for me just thinking about where is everybody? Are they staying in place? And knowing that the beach opened up a couple weeks ago and people were walking down right past my parents' house, and my dad's got lung problems, and it just really terrified me. So I would just say, even though this is the scariest thing that I've ever been through in my life, I just want people to really just take an extra second and think about it. If you feel like a fool walking around in a mask, that's okay. You know what? People are going to love you and respect you anyway. And because of it, not because you're not doing it, but because you're doing it, because you care and you love enough your family to not put them in danger, and that you care enough about yourself to be willing to just do the right thing. That's just my heart. That's not my science. I want everybody to be okay. I want to be able to see everybody again.
And we wear these masks not because we're letting the government impinge on our freedoms, but so that we don't infect our brothers and sisters who just had their lungs replaced.
That's
right?
Yeah, and if you wear a mask and I wear a mask, we really diminish the opportunity to transmit it. So one of us wearing a mask is okay. Both of us wearing a mask is way better.
Teri, you have a lot of people that are saying thank you. Denise, Carol, Clara. There's a lot of people. Alex. There's a lot of people in here. Robin, they're saying thank you to you. You've been your time tonight has been very much appreciated by all of us.
I seriously appreciate having the venue, John. I really, really do. It's been it feels like a real honor to be able to share some of the education that I've been granted, and so thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. We'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot. And thanks, Eric. Nice to meet you.
Got everybody out there. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Common Ground. We really appreciate you being here tonight. I'm going to wrap it up with my closing comments, and I'll give you 5 guesses what I'm going to talk about right now. So let me Terry, do you want to hang around, or should you want to go do you have other things you got to go do?
I can hang around for a little bit, sure.
Okay, I'm gonna you're just gonna listen to my bloviating.
Okay.
So this is called The Way I See It, and for those of you who are new, I wrap the show up this way every week. But here is the way I see it. America, you're so badass. It's scary. No, really, you're scaring me. In the script for the inevitable Netflix project Coronavirus, the movie, we've reached this scene. The President of the United States, played by Joe Exotic, the Tiger King guy, says, "Hey, coronavirus, we're the US of freaking A, and we've had enough. We've put up with your crap for 10 whole weeks. We've sacrificed our paychecks, our Sunday services, our sports games, and our ability to spend most of our waking hours away from our children. But we are done, you hear me? We're going back to the way things ought to be. And you better not get in our way, or you're going to get a big red, white, and blue boot up your ass." And that's the scene. So believe it or not, people are cheering for this scene. Americans are demanding of their state and local governments, to whom authority and apparently responsibility for corona response appears to have been abdicated by federal leadership, that we suck it up and prove that coronavirus has been an overhyped boogeyman from the start, and we aren't going to play by those rules anymore. With the American spirit at the helm, we've navigated our ship out of this mist of fear that those sneaky doctors and scientists and left-wing weaklings have had us mired in. And we look to be reaching the end of the coronavirus lockdown. Hallelujah, right? Well, if we're so brave and heroic and almost out of this mess, why do I have the sneaking feeling that we're about to fumble the ball on the goal line? Speaking of movies, you know the movie The Avengers? Well, there's a scene in that film that makes me think about exactly where we are with this crisis. I'm a big fan of superhero movies. In the scene, an army of intergalactic space creatures have attacked New York City. The devastation which ensues is horrific. Marvel could have paid for Bernie Sanders' college plan with their CGI budget just for that battle sequence. In one scene, the New York City police, entirely overwhelmed by a foe they have no idea how to face, look up from the battle and see Captain America standing atop a wrecked automobile, shouting at them to establish a perimeter 3 blocks down and move all these people off the street. The police look at him and say, "Why should we take orders from you?" That exact moment, several of the terrifying aliens land in the frame surrounding the red, white, and blue Avenger. Captain America immediately leaps into action and dispatches them with great strength and skill. And in the next second, the police captain turns to his men and starts to repeat verbatim Captain America's orders about what to do. Any thoughts of questioning his authority are removed by this impressive show of strength, command, and kick-ass. And we love it. I did. We smile, we nod our heads, we cheer. What's the message? Well, when the shit hits the fan, put the strongest person in charge, right? It makes sense to me. And that's not just some silly 20th century movie cliche. This works. And there's a reason it works. Following strength is embedded in our DNA. It compels our animal brain to move us into action. It's a method of survival. No wonder why, sitting huddled in dark movie theaters, we respond so powerfully to seeing these themes of heroism and heroic action. At one time, our lives may have depended on finding a strong leader and following him or her. And our cells in our limbic system, they remember this deep human instinct. Follow those who are strong and know what to do when faced with adversity and receive their protection and survive. Nowadays, however, life and death situations are a lot harder to come by. They're rare for most of us. In our comfortable first world existence, the movies are probably the only place we're likely to experience these threat to your survival and life as we know it situations. Then along came a global pandemic called coronavirus. Suddenly, in nearly every community on the planet, people were dying at an alarming rate. And we were faced with the first real existential threat in most of our lifetimes. So our old brain mechanisms kick in and we start looking for strength to follow. But we have another challenge to face. We have to define what strength is in this situation, because The post goalposts have moved. We have vast resources our prehistoric brethren never even dreamed of. These resources grant us insight into the behavior of disease, and they're now our finest weapons and our best chance against this enemy. The strength that we use to fight a pandemic must be the strength of wisdom, study, research, designing strategies based on the best factual data we can get our hands on, and then execution of those strategies. Bravado, bullets, and muscles, they mean nothing against this enemy. Instead of star-spangled shields and big metal things that blow up other big metal things, we need to arm ourselves with information. That requires using that muscle we so often forget about, the one between our ears. And between America's ears, well, there may be a little bit of muscle atrophy. So the big question is, can the country that needed 9 Fast and Furious movies develop a healthy respect for facts and data in time to prevent another spike in COVID deaths? Or will we declare enough and hop into our monster trucks and pull out our AK-47s and demand our rights, consequences be damned? And I'm talking about American rights, the right to go to Walmart and church, often in the same strip mall, the right to have my dinner or 16 varieties of microbrew IPAs in corporate chain restaurants and fake pubs with names that start with the Irish idiom Mick. You get it, Eric? It's like McDonald's and Mac pubs that you got it. Look, I'm joking around a bit, but I'm afraid that we are basing a collective decision on when to get back to normal on our emotions rather than strategy that protects lives and the economy. In my town, as Eric was saying, we've had one of the largest upticks in new cases since this thing started, and we are opening up the bars and restaurants this same week. We aren't doing this because of the science or the results that show it to be reasonably safe. We're doing it because we don't like waiting anymore. It's a big weekend. There's money to be made, so yeah. And economic motivations are valid. I understand people are fearing for their livelihood. I am too. It's a legitimate concern, but consider this. What happens to all these businesses if we rush out of lockdown, provoked by a few loud voices getting some press who consider rebellion for rebellion's sake patriotic, and this thing spikes again? Your customers will be gone again, but this time they won't be coming back. Because if we head back on a whim and a lot more people get sick, then you're really going to see the economy in a type of trouble we might not make it out of. Because people will go home and hide, and they won't come out again. We only get one shot at this restart, in my opinion. We screwed up the first time, and our country will develop PTSD about a return to back to normal, deep down in our collective psyche. Something we know about PTSD, it's not easy to get rid of. We have streets full of homeless war veterans who teach us that lesson. So to all you people who want to rip the masks off your faces and walk bravely into the wide open spaces of what your life was before all of this, for no reason other than I've had enough of this crap, I understand, but please slow down and give this some thought. We've all endured a lot, and we managed to do this together. Maybe we need to hang in there a bit longer for each other. We do need to get back to our lives, but we need to do it strategically. For the right reasons. Testing is ramping up. Let's see what it shows us over the next couple of weeks. Remember when we had the dictum of 2 weeks of decline in new cases and hospitalization before we examined lifting restrictions? What happened to that? Is that happening in your communities? It should be before you head back to the bar, office, or beach. Look, social distancing worked, at least to some extent. There's evidence from places like South Korea and San Francisco and Washington State that bear that out. We did it. But what if it's not over? Why do we want to rush out of the theater with 5 minutes of the movie left? Let's slow down. We don't have to stop. Just slow down as we race back out the door. Look, listen, think, consider all that we've sacrificed, and more importantly, consider how much worse it will sting if all of that sacrifice was for nothing. Guys, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I'm John Lombardi, your host. I really want to thank Teri and Eric for being with me. It's been amazing. And all of you folks out there, please like and follow our page. We really appreciate you. As I said, this is our show, Common Ground, and we will see you guys next Friday. Thank you very much.
Our brothers and sisters who just had their lungs replaced.
I think we're done.
Right?
Thanks, John. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Teri. Thank you.
And all of you folks
I know
out
I'm
there,
still
please
live,
like
Eric.
and follow our page. We really appreciate you. As I said,
I-
this is the show.